What's good, my people? It's about Mr. Lex, and we are back again for another reaction on this BrBpTV. Be real, be positive, brothers and sisters. With that said, let us get into the vibrations right there. Now, this is actually the presentation of the electoral reform report, brothers and sisters, brought to you by the government of Dominica, brothers and sisters. I'm thinking to myself, before I get into that, guys, is it the government that should be getting in, be presenting this thing, or isn't it the individuals who are involved in the electoral commissions that should be presenting this? No, true. What? Yes, no. I don't know. What are your thoughts, guys? Anyways, let's get into the vibrations.
Creator and giver of life.
Okay.
Upon us as we convene to discuss this important.
Okay, you're not in. Okay. That okay. I guess.
Carried. Honorable Levi Peter, Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Dominica, honorable members of Cabinet and
okay, let's get into
government organizations and other interest groups.
Where's the opposition? Is the opposition there?
Members of the media, government, church of the.
Is the opposition there? I think that no, that's not Lennox. Is the opposition there? Interesting.
Senior government officials, representatives of churches, trade unions, private sector bodies, non-government organizations and other interest groups, members of the media, all Dominicans following this broadcast live via all media platforms represented here today. Good afternoon, and it is my honor to welcome.
Oh, I don't think. Is it the opposition, or are we looking for the independent opposition team? I don't think I see them there either. But anyways, guys, that's not the point.
Of the final report to conduct a full review of Dominica's electoral system. The process over the last 2.5 years has included consultation with a wide cross-section of stakeholders as part of the review process.
Did they include the people? That's one of the things that I want to know, because I don't think that has happened. Or are they going to be presenting it to the people now, since they have the final reform report? But shouldn't they present that to the people when it's in its draft stage? I don't know. It's kind of confusing for me, brothers and sisters. I don't know how Dominica does operate.
Now that the report has been completed and submitted to the government of Dominica, we are here today to mark the beginning of the national consultation on the report.
Oh, so they're going to be consulting on what is taking place on the report. Okay.
And the recommendations for the modernization of our electoral system.
No, it's not modernization, no. We need the reform first. We need the complete reform first, and then the modernization afterwards. To come with the modernized nonsense, man.
We are pleased that you have agreed to join us today, and I trust that your engagement of this honorable Levi.
Guys, I'm forward. I think they call Levi to be presented.
Ms. Karen Prevost, Secretary to the Cabinet, here to deal with the presentation of the report in respect to the electoral process in Dominica. I really will just be touching on some of the aspects of the two main bills. The process this afternoon is of handing out copies of the report along with the relevant supporting legislation, so that everybody will have an opportunity to go through the documents themselves, so go through the report, go through the draft legislation.
So pretty much it's like a draft. The presented report is a draft that they're going to be presenting to people, and I'm guessing that the people then will say, okay, no, we don't need this, we need this, blah, blah, blah. So I'm guessing that's what's going to happen. But like I said before, guys, and I'm putting this out there again, for the individuals who are voting from overseas, I believe that they should have their own constituency, whether it be digitally, but they should have their own constituency. So we wouldn't have to be worried about individuals going away from 5 years and all those kind of things and wondering if they came within Dominica and this kind of things. That would be nice, yes, that they come Dominica within a certain amount of days to then have the ability to vote. I agree. But since they seem to be using corruption within this practice, I think the best thing that they need to do is to remove all that, allow every Dominican that has the ability to be Dominican, they have the passport or something, they can present one of these things, and then once they present these things, then they can vote. Or I think they need to all have voter ID cards, so they come to Dominica, whatever obligation are needed to be met. They are able to fulfill these obligations. They get the voter ID cards. Then they can go overseas and whatnot. If the voter ID card is for 5-10 years, whatever it is, then they can use these cards and vote online in that one constituency. They don't need to come down to Dominica and vote and then screw up people's constituency. No. In that way, we include every single person. Yes, brothers and sisters, we include every single person, those overseas and those in Dominica. And obviously, those overseas do not affect the majority of the individuals in Dominica, because if you have one constituency for the overseas voters and you have the rest 21 constituencies for the people in Dominica, then what's going to happen? Whatever the overseas people decide, maybe if there's well, I don't think there will be an equilibrium since it's 21 seats, but well, then again, it's 22 seats, but you guys get my point. I think in that way they can vote in that one constituency, whether they're in Antigua, whether in Suriname, whether in Curacao, America, UK, London, wherever they be, brothers and sisters, they will be able to vote in that one constituency, and it will not affect the rest of the other constituencies, reflecting the will of the people. This whole thing about government officials bringing in people to vote and putting them in different constituencies and all this kind of craziness there should stop immediately, and that is one of the ways I believe it can actually help. So I've put this out there. I've spoken to a number of individuals out there within the sector of this thing. So hopefully that can come through, or they can wait and see if it makes sense or not. You guys can let me know if it makes sense or not as well.
And the Honourable Prime Minister will elaborate when he comes to address. But as you may already have, the intention is that at some point later down.
Why is the Attorney General doing this? Shouldn't it be the Electoral Commission individuals that are doing this stuff? Why is the Prime Minister presenting this? I'm still mind boggled by this, but anyways, guys, let's continue.
Like next month, consultations.
Is he? I think maybe he's part of the Electoral Commissions. Maybe he's part of them. Maybe that's why he's there. Anyways.
So everybody have enough opportunity to study the bills and study the reports and have the contributions that they wish to make, if they wish to make any, which they feel or may feel.
One of the things that we should not relent on, brothers and sisters, is having voter ID cards. We should definitely have voter ID cards.
Can improve upon what is. The idea is what we're talking about. We can hopefully arrive at the legislative process and the legislative what we all want. Already know. But prior to 2005, I think it's fair to say that there was very little contention in respect to the electoral process. So,
of course, there was contention. What are you talking about? What are you talking about, bruh?
it was far less than this.
It's not as much as it is today, but yes, there was contention. But anyways.
The legislation that we now have in place, the House of Assembly Elections Act, which is found in Chapter 201 of our laws, that came into effect on the 16th of July of 1951. My arithmetic is not the best, but I think that's somewhere around 72 years ago. The other substantive piece of legislation which governs our electoral process is the Registration of Electors Act. That's found in Chapter 203 of our laws, and that came into effect on the 20th of June of 1974, approximately 49 years ago. It's quite clear that both pieces of legislation have been around for a while. Yeah. It's also clear, if one pauses for a moment to think about it, the 1951 and 1974 predate 1978. That is to say, 1978, 3rd of November, is the point at which we became an independent nation. We attained our independence from the United Kingdom. And that is to say, throughout our independence, these two pieces of legislation have been what we've had, and which has governed all of the electoral processes and all the general elections that we've had since independence.
So that means it was about time that this thing changed.
That is to say further, that each and every major political party in Dominica has won and lost elections under those self-same pieces of legislation.
Nothing wrong with that. The point is that since a number of persons have died and all these kind of things have tended to take place, or there's been bribery and treating going on, for which cases have been thrown out instead of being heard by the court, even though the CCJ stated that this thing needs to be heard. I mean, there's, as a result of the rules being whether individuals win or lose as a result of this thing, I mean, this thing needs to be changed. It needs to be properly identified and rectified.
There are.
So he just pointing out as if there's not a problem. There is a problem there, my brother. You saying this to try to soften the thing as, oh, everybody has been winning and losing. What has happened back then versus now, 20 years later, with individuals' names who are on this list who have not been cleared, individuals from overseas who keep coming down to Dominica to vote, who have bypassed the 5 years. I mean, these things need to be cleared. Whether it was the individuals coming back in 1999 or 2005, whichever it is, and then people have not been to Dominica, they need to be removed. Simple. It's not about who winning and who losing. You're trying to use a certain tactic.
Things that we can benefit from improving on, and hopefully this process will take us somewhere down that road. The legislation and the electoral system that it underpins has, unfortunately, despite repeatedly being declared by election observers and others who have sought to assist us.
So the election observers have only been going based off the laws and the rules that are presently there. Everybody knows that the rules and laws need to be changed. They need to be what is it? What I look, not modernized, but they need to be adapted to present society. You cannot be using what happened back in the old rules back then to be applied today when it's not applicable today. I mean
Electoral process, despite their confirmation that all legislation.
It seems like he's coming with an agenda there. He's not coming on a neutral basis there. Well, obviously he's on the government side, so he's going to try to, soften the blow. But I'm here, guys. I'm here to see and make it make sense.
Electoral legislation is adequate to ensure free and fair elections, and that indeed that legislation has done so.
No, it's not. Everybody know bribery and cheating was taking place. When you bring in all kind of artists and they put in on red shit and then they saying, hey, we voted Labour, we voted for Skerrit, we're bringing Skerrit back. That is treating. That is treating. That there's no.
Several past elections, we continue to hear.
When we seen all the planes that come in, I mean, come on.
We calls for reform, which is not necessarily a problematic issue. But more problematic is the allegations of wrongdoing and the various claims that have been circulating and somewhat poisoning our social fabric over the past several years. The government, recognizing that despite the fact that the existing legislation is fit for purpose, recognizing that you can always improve, has sought to make improvements. As I think we all know, the two major areas of concern that have been expressed over the past years are the issue of the list, some describing it as bloated,
Yep,
some describing it as requiring to be cleansed.
it does.
But I think we can all agree that the number of people on the electoral register exceed the number of people who are lawfully entitled to vote at this particular time. And I think it's probably fair to say that for a number of years now, there has been general consensus in Dominica.
So you're proving the point that even the list from back then and the list now, people who were alive back then and the people who are alive who are not alive now, there's some sort of thing that needs to happen. It needs to be cleared.
Amongst certainly the leading political parties and amongst leading serious members of society, that we as a nation could benefit from the register of electors being revised so as to ensure that only those people who are lawfully entitled to be on that register are on it. Equally, I think it's fair to say that there has been general consensus that, albeit identification cards may not strictly be necessary and certainly will not be a panacea. And I pause here to say that the United Kingdom, a place that I have some familiarity with, has some 60+ million inhabitants. They have elections, and I think they've only recently started talking about utilizing identification cards.
No. Voter ID cards. There's a difference. Not voter ID cards they're talking about.
I'm not aware of any suggestion that the elections that take place.
And keep in mind, just because another country is doing something particularly there, it doesn't mean it's applicable here. You have to understand that. It is what is applicable here, not what is applicable over here. We need voter ID cards as a result of the kind of corruption that is taking place. People coming in, voting in a number of places. Come on, something needs to be done.
In any way efficient. And I'm not saying that to say that we should not proceed down that route, because I think we pretty much most of us have agreed only because it might assist us to have greater peace.
Yes, we need greater peace.
That the introduction of identification cards and the requirement
voter ID cards. We don't identify voter ID cards.
produce
They keep saying that over and over, thinking we don't know. Voter ID cards is needed.
identification card so as to receive a ballot and to cast a ballot and engage in the electoral process. I think most people have
What will give the best fair chance of free and fair elections would be voter ID cards. Individuals can have identification cards and just come in. If there's a certain requirement needed to have the voter ID cards, then you need to fulfill this requirement. It's not a difficult process. And if you fulfill these requirements as a result of what you guys are trying to push, then they will get the voter ID cards. Free and fair. If you're outside the country and you're not in Dominica for 180 days or whatever they say that you're supposed to be in Dominica within the 5 years, so you can actually see what is going on before you are able to give a proper consenting vote. If you are not within this thing, then you should not be allowed to vote. I don't understand. So identification can have to do with that now.
by now, but that is also something that is desired. In 2017, the government of Dominica, having spent a considerable amount of time, effort and energy on drafting legislation to bring about the requested cleansing of the list and the introduction of identification cards for the purpose.
So you're saying that they have been doing this for a long time, yet still they call elections twice? Huh? They call elections twice? Who you telling that, they? Me?
A requirement for mandatory reduction of the card to vote. Produced draft legislation by way of a registration of Electors Act 2017 and House of Assembly Elections Act 2017 and proceeded to Parliament with those bills. Bills received the first reading, as I recall, if I recall correctly, and due to unfortunate circumstances, as I shall say at this point in time, Parliament was not able to proceed any further, and those bills were shelved. We're now in 2023. That is to say, 6 years ago, we could have had legislation that would have provided for mandatory use of identification cards so as to engage in
That's how we need voter ID cards, not identification cards. Voter ID cards which are specifically for voting.
the electoral process. We could have had a list that would be clearer than it is today.
And there's something interesting there. He didn't mention it. I was going to say something about it, but I'll leave it there.
That's for sure. It may not be perfect, but it will be clearer than it is today. But unfortunately, we missed that boat.
Because of
Subsequently, 2018-2019, the government tried again, and on that occasion, its effort was again thwarted.
which effort they tried. Which effort they tried, huh? After the opposition had presented it and they rejected it, which effort they tried?
We are where we are. We all know what has happened.
You forget we saw the letter of Tony Astafan, man. You forget we saw that letter saying that if there is electoral reform, he will scared to lose his re-election legacy. You forget we saw that letter, man. All right.
In years, I hope that we all wish, honestly and seriously, to get over this hurdle of electoral reform.
But it's only that preventing the government that preventing it from happening. This is why he called elections twice, 2019 and 2022. Because he doesn't want his re-election legacy to ruin. Because if he does do electoral reform, he most likely going to lose, his re-election legacy. That's why now they're trying to put it, but then he's saying he's not going to be running again.
And to get to a position where we can comfortably engage in the electoral process.
Anyway, let's move on.
Coalition for all of our benefit.
You're saying that over and over.
Whoever is the loser is magnanimous. And
Okay.
where we can all
Where's the opposition now?
hopefully, honestly,
And I'm not just talking about UWP people, I'm talking about the others. I'm talking about the independent
process of
candidates.
advancement of electoral reform or electoral modernization in Dominica.
No electoral reform. Don't come and twist and say what Scared want to say there. Electoral reform, partner.
And to that end, the government engaged with observations, with recommendations, out of that, with an acceptable set of legislation and processes to take us forward. in our quest for electoral reform. So Dennis Byron, when he accepted the invitation and took up the assignment, recognized that there were challenges. And so Dennis encapsulated the challenge facing Dominica and us in achieving our electoral reform objectives in these following words. The existing legislation regarding the registration of electors, as well as the electoral process, has been a flashpoint for political disagreement and community dissatisfaction. I have been mindful that my engagement carries the expectation of bridging the sharp divisions of opinion that have hindered the completion of this reform exercise over several years.
You mean like when they call elections, knowing that they have called Dennis Byron to do the electoral reform report, and then they call elections, knowing that he was doing it? Boy.
I repeat, I hope we can get over those sharp divisions. Things, and he recognized in the report, which when you receive it, you'll see at page 3, broadly, he highlighted the following. That he was mindful of the mandate to effectively review the election process and legislation to identify challenges which impede the voting rights the following objectives. 1. Review existing legislation and reports from various past consultants, chief elections officers, and experts. 2. Review and advise on the provisions for voter eligibility, including the use of identification cards for the purposes of voting,
voter ID cards,
and whether the law ought to also provide for other additional methods of identification. 3. To advise on best practices for maintaining the updated electoral register that will not result in the repudiation of the right to vote and or disenfranchisement of legitimate qualified voters.
This is why I mentioned, okay, if we want everybody to come and vote, let the overseas voters have their one constituency, and all that issue would be gone. It would not affect the rest of Dominica, of the will of the people in Dominica who are actually living in Dominica, but it also give the people overseas the ability to also vote and participate in the country for which they were born. Not true.
4. Present a registration of electors bill and a registration of electors regulations. 5. Present a House of Assembly elections bill and a House of Assembly elections regulations. So Dennis was indicated and recognized that the conclusions, objectives, and recommendations contained in his report are indicated as having been achieved primarily through the following. The conduct of consultations with stakeholders. Many of you here would have engaged with Sir Dennis in the process, and those stakeholders are to include the government, political parties, civil society, civic groups, NGOs, and other interested persons, individuals, organizations, or groupings. And written and oral submissions to Sir Dennis from those stakeholders. Also, review of electoral laws, draft electoral amendments, and submissions, written and oral, and the conduct of research, if and as necessary or required. And 3, the provision of a report that advises on the way forward, including but not limited to any recommended legislative reforms to achieve the above stated objective. So Dennis decided to adopt a 2-phase approach in these, towards the end of last year, in or about November, I believe. And the second phase and the completing final element of his report was just recently provided approximately a week ago. That's phase 2. So in his final submission, so Dennis provided copies of both the phase 1 and phase 2 reports. And I expect and anticipate that you will receive copies of those reports.
I need to get it. Hopefully there's a digital copy for us to review it, guys. If you guys have it, send it for me. But most likely we're going to be getting it. But if you guys have it, send it for me for us to make a quick review of that.
Of the electoral list and registration of only eligible voters with emphasis on voter identification.
Voter ID cards, that is what I'm talking about.
Phase 2 report addressed issues associated with the electoral process, including some, what the report termed, institutional matters regarding A, the Electoral Commission, and B, the proposed legislation for improvement of the electoral process.
I think they also should have a certain criteria, okay? Just like America has only 2 terms, I think they should also include that in there as well. So that will avoid mass scale corruption happening for years upon years upon years. You can only have one, you vote one, you win the first term, the second term you win, that's it, don't come back.
In that instance, emphasis on
I
campaign.
don't care if you do good or well. The country is not yours. It's not your mother own. It's not your father country. Come on, Degas.
Campaign financing. So, the report resulted in draft legislation because it is the draft, it is the
You
legislation
just say that, remember that.
recommendations that
Would you like to waste time?
so then it's expression. Substantive pieces of legislation. The first is the Registration of Electors Act of 2003, which, if and when it is fine-tuned and accepted to be tabled before Parliament, will be tabled with the title Registration of Electors Bill 2023. And once that has been debated in Parliament and if approved, and then if it received the assent of His Excellency the President, that will become an act, and it will become the Registration of Electors Act concerning registration of electors. That Sir Dennis has provided contains 6 parts and 61 clauses. Those 61 clauses, if they all survive, will, when this becomes an act, become sections. So you might want to bear that in mind as you read. It doesn't really change the substance, it's just a different terminology. Part 1 of the Registration of Electors Act, the bill, contains 3 clauses. They are the short title, which is really the name that is usually used when referring to the piece of legislation. A provision dealing with interpretation of various terms used in the document.
The definition and the
application, and of expressly providing that the Act applies to the registration of electors for the election of members of A, the House of Assembly, B, a city, town, urban or village council, and C, the Kalinago Territory Council, and deals with polling districts. Part 2 consists of 2 clauses and deals with polling districts and the appointment of officers. So that's clause 4 and clause 5. Really, we know what a polling district is. There's a certain set criteria at the moment. If there's any change which occurs so as to amend a particular polling district, the authority for that is on...
And guys, we need to get heavily involved in that. We need to get heavily involved. It's not Security Electoral Act that there, by the way, is the people's own. So people get heavily involved. I know some of all you lazy. Get involved, man. My goodness, that is for free and fair elections. To reflect the will of the people, not to reflect the will of those the people on top. The servants you put on top that making you become the servants. It's not so it does work.
Clause 4. Clause 5 provides for the Chief Elections Officer to also hold the office of Chief Registering Officer for the purposes of matters to do with elections.
Obviously.
Part 6 consists of 29 clauses and deals with the registration of electors. Clauses 6, 7, and 8 provide for the entitlement of a person who is registered in a polling district on the day of an election to vote in that polling district. It also identifies the factors which will qualify a person to be registered to vote and identifies factors which will disqualify a person from being registered to vote. Clauses 9 and 10 provide for other matters related to registration to vote, including the power of registration officials to visit premises and conduct investigations in relation to the existence of a person or the residency status of a person within a particular polling district. Clause 11 is an important provision and provides for the issuance of identification cards, the designation of authorized issuing locations, and establishment and maintenance of a roll of names of those to whom identification cards have been issued.
Voter identification
Clause 12
cards.
is also very important. It provides a provision which makes explicit the right of an elector to have his or her name remain on the register of electors unless and until that elector's name is removed from the register for one of the permissible reasons. The reasons are largely those that existed previously, or I should say which exist now on the existing legislation. There's Section 7 in the existing Act, but it will be Section 12 if the numbering remains the same, and certainly in terms of the draft provided by Sir Dennis, it's Clause 12. The reasons in this draft that would lead to a person's name being removed, or could lead to that, are as follows. An objection to a person's registration having been allowed. A. B. A person has died.
Yeah, they need to come out.
having regard to Section 26 has been absent from Dominica for a period exceeding 5 or 10 years. Those figures are in square brackets, denoting that the author of the report is not recommending one or other, but is recommending that the Dominican society consider which, if any, of those two periods
5 years
consider appropriate. Or 3 has become disqualified for registration as an elector under this Act or any other written law imposing disqualifications for registration as an elector. C, the person has requested the deletion of his or her name from the register. Or D, the person's registration has not been confirmed in accordance with Section 50. Now, 2 of those reasons are changes from what existed previously. As it were, what exists now. So, one of those is that it's been postulated in the report that it should no longer be sufficient for a person to have been in Dominica at least once within the 5-year period immediately preceding the date of the last publication of the Register of Electors. What is being suggested is that instead, a person would now need, under these provisions, to have spent an aggregate of at least either 50 or 90 days in Dominica during a 5 or 10-year period, depending on what.
No. First of all you make it 10. No, 5 years, and then you just spend 120 days in Dominica. Come on, go away, Dominica.
If any of those that the society was to adopt. So that is clearly a change from what exists at the moment, and that
don't make that go 10 years. No, people, trust me. Don't do that now. Oh no.
That's one of the things that we as Dominicans, as a society, would have to consider whether we retain what we have, or whether we move to something different. Registers and lists. Clause 13 provides for the register existing at the date of this Act, that this Act comes into force, to be adopted as the first register of electors under this Act. Clause 14 provides for the inclusion of the names of electors confirmed pursuant to Section 51 in the preliminary register. Clause 15 provides for the preparation and publication of the preliminary list. Clause 16 provides for corrections to the preliminary list. And Clause 17 provides for continuous registration. None of those are particularly, I suggest, controversial. They are essentially present in our existing legislation.
Okay, guys, I'm just gonna leave this right there. What are your thoughts of this so far? Leave your thoughts in the comment box below, guys, and of course I'll post this link in the description below so you guys can definitely check it out right there. This is gonna be a long one. You can pretty much tell we just about reach halfway of this thing. I think there's a presentation of them giving a number of individuals the report. You can see they're giving some individuals a presentation of report. Okay, we see the opposition there. One of the opposition members there. So I think they were giving some individuals the books and stuff.
Police welfare, so I work with this.
Let's go through them quickly. What is that? Oh.
The president.
Okay, you get one. Hey, Randy get one. All right.
Associate of the Dominica Council.
Okay, so a set of people get them, guys. So yes, guys, I will leave that in the description below so you guys can check it out right there. And with all that said right there, guys, give this video a thumbs up if you understand it. If you want to see more, definitely subscribe and turn on that post notification so you can get all the videos as they tend to come through. Guys, we need to take this thing serious, brothers and sisters, for free and fair elections. Too much squabble happening, man. And people causing corruption and all kind of craziness happening and dwindling the people's ability for the true representative, the majority of individuals, true representative. Anyways, guys, what I said right there, like I said before, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on the post notifications so you can get all the videos as they tend to come through. And I'll see you guys in the next reaction video. Boomba.